and you can make the change with us. Sign up for the free Big Fat 30-Day Challenge at zliving.com.
There had to be some reason why I was hurting and why I was in such pain and so stiff. It just didn't feel like that was normal.
There were times there I just didn't know whether I had married a nut because nobody could find anything wrong.
Dr. Bluestone explained to me that there is no cure. And when I heard that, it was kind of like a life sentence. There is no cure. I am going to be a cripple. Arthritis is something that I heard that only old people had arthritis. My mom had bouts and grandma had bouts with arthritis, but I was 24, 25.
It was a bit difficult to absorb the fact that she was going to be a fused human being, depending upon how this thing progressed.
Quickly, within maybe 6 months, I started experiencing lower back pain. I had never had any medical issues, no injuries, no diseases growing up. This was all really new to me.
At first, okay, her back bothered her, and people's backs bother them at times. She would go through periods of almost debilitating pain.
Sometimes I would have to slide my way out of the bed, land on my knees, and then gradually, by holding on to the side of the bed, I would pull myself to an upright position and then slowly try to shuffle my way into the bathroom. Initially, I was noticing that I would have sporadic pain, and it was every once in a while. Then I would have some episodes that it would just go away. And I thought, oh, maybe it's over, it's behind. The frequency of the pain started increasing over time to the point that I would be in pain as I turned over in bed. If I was in a car and it was a bumpy ride, the pure jolting of the car would cause me to react and freeze my body and tense up. I grew up in a very average, typical New York lifestyle. We lived in Long Island, and I had very nurturing, loving parents. I spent most of my time in school. That was my thing. I was always very good in math. I studied accounting, and I was valedictorian of the class because I achieved the highest grade point average in the School of Management that year.
At Syracuse University, June struck up a friendship with fellow accounting student Lee Stein.
We seemed to have lots in common, and I think for me it was love at first sight.
I mean, we sort of bonded really quickly. Junior year of college.
June and Lee got married after graduating. June worked at prestigious East Coast accounting firms for a few years, and then accepted a job as the tax director of a $500 million trucking company in San Francisco. The Steins were on a fast track to success. With big plans for the future, Lee commuted to Beverly Hills to establish a business management firm for celebrities, but his ambition was muted by concerns over the health of his young wife.
To see June falling apart right after we were married, I mean, we married really young. I was 22, June was 21. We were both on fairly aggressive career tracks, and then all of a sudden, everything was about this pain from nowhere with no diagnosis.
For a while, I just tried to ignore it and assume that it would get better, and that wasn't helping. So Lee and I saw an orthopedic doctor, and he suggested that I get a bone scan. And the bone scan, luckily, was negative for any type of cancer.
These bone scans, which were pretty fancy technology for the late 70s, and they didn't find anything, and then she would get better, and then she would get worse.
Nobody was able to diagnose what was the cause of my pain.
Everything either had to be sort of black and white to me, and when they couldn't find anything, it raised lots of questions. There were times there I just didn't know whether I had married a nut because nobody could find anything wrong.
It sounds horrible that I wanted to have a diagnosis, but it just felt like there had to be some reason why I was hurting and why I was in such pain and so stiff. It just didn't feel like that was normal. It involved sitting a lot, and I remember after sitting for 2 hours working on schedules, working on tax returns, and getting up, and I was like, oh, the pain is back, I'm hurting. I would walk with a limp as I was, taking a little break. And I thought, well, maybe we haven't pursued rheumatology. Maybe it was a joint disease and not a bone disease. So we had a recommendation to see a Dr. Birnbaum. We went to his office, and he ordered CAT scans, and the CAT scans started to show something, but he wasn't quite sure what it might be. And he read about a new genetic marker, a tissue type called the HLA-B27. And he read that if people are positive for that genotype, that there's a correlation to a disease called ankylosing spondylitis. He said, June, I don't think that you have that because it is so rare in women, but why don't we just run the test?
June heard back from Dr. Birnbaum shortly after he'd received the test results.
And anytime a doctor calls you back, you know something's not good. And he explained to me that I was positive for HLA-B27, and that meant that there was a high likelihood that the pain that I was experiencing in my sacroiliac joints was due to the progression of this disease, ankylosing spondylitis.
Dr. Birnbaum was a true professional to quickly refer us to Dr. Bluestone at Cedars-Sinai as the real expert on HLA-B27 tissue typing correlations.
I first got to know June when she was a young lady of 25, when she came to see me in my office with a complaint of severe low back pain. June was a systemically healthy-looking, intelligent, slender young woman, very body-aware, had no difficulty describing clearly and effectively a state of serious low back pain, more on one side than the other.
He looked at the x-rays, looked at the CAT scans, and said, there's no doubt in my mind that you have a well-documented case of ankylosing spondylitis.
Ankylosing spondylitis is an inflammatory disease. It is genetically determined, but what is so unusual is that the inflammatory process very quickly goes through a healing phase. So right away the inflamed area becomes replaced out of inflammation with fibrous scar tissue. That fibrous scar tissue may rapidly, over months, calcify. And then the calcification can turn to bone, ossify.
Another name of ankylosing spondylitis is bamboo spine, because eventually the same inflammation, calcification, fusion process works its way up the spinal cord, all the way up to the neck.
A young person can go from a painful spine with mobility to, over the years, a completely rigid, deformed spine as the muscles and ligaments pull you over into a picture of deformity and kyphosis.
Dr. Bluestone was very, very clear and no uncertain terms with what we were facing. So it was more than just giving it a name. It existed. It was this real condition that needed to be dealt with.
I was relieved, but at the same time I was stunned, because never having paid attention to my body, being healthy my whole life, oh my gosh, am I going to be fused?
It was a bit difficult to absorb the fact that she was going to be a fused human being, depending upon how this thing progressed.
Dr. Bluestone prescribed naproxen and explained that that would help the pain that I was experiencing, but that it would not stop the progression of the disease.
Conventional medicine had an answer, which was anti-inflammatory medications and painkillers that really have a purpose. But it wasn't going to lead June to the solution. I mean, June never accepted that she was going to deteriorate the way that the prognosis of this disease normally works.
Dr. Bluestone explained to me that there is no cure. And when I heard that, it was kind of like a life sentence. There is no cure, I am going to be a cripple. And I just could not accept that. I thought somehow that's not going to be the end of my story.